Welcome GRD132 typography, and we're going to work with web typography again, and this is exercise 15, and what we're going to do is we're just going to use a system of relative sizing, and we've talked about this a little bit using ems, we've talked about percents, but what we're going to do is we're going to look at something called typescale.com, and this has different systems set up for different types of layouts, so you can basically have a structure of different sizes. And we're going to kind of use like a regular or medium size, a small size, and a bigger size for paragraphs. And then we're going to use a couple headlines. We'll probably just use an H1 and an H2. We don't have to use all these here, but you'll see these increments here, or these units, are set up as rems. And you might have heard of ems, but rems are basically just root. They're basically just linked to the root size of a page, which typically is 16 point. Now, if you're not sure, if you go to any kind of web page, I'll even go to this one here, where you could really go is just go to your preferences. Now, usually you'll see the three dots over here, and you'll go to settings, and when you go to appearance, and you go down to font size, it says medium. Now, you don't know what size that is, but if you go to customize fonts, you'll see some things here like 16, and you can see that the standard font is times, the serif font is times, and they're all 16. The sans serif is PT Sans, sometimes that'll be Helvetica or Arial, and the fixed width monospace font is Monaco, and that's actually 13. And you could change these if you want, but basically 16 is usually the base font for most browsers. Now, people can change that, so that's why we're going to work relatively, so that if people change it, everything else will adjust, and everything will adjust in kind of a sequence too, so you're not changing every single thing on the page. You could just do it in one place. So let's kind of work on this, and this is an example of kind of what we did here using rems, and rems aren't much different than ems, except they basically link to the root, which is 16, or wherever it may be to start. We're just going to have a headline, a subhead, and 3 size paragraphs. That's it. So we're just going to do a little bit here just to focus on rems and show you how it can help kind of streamline your layout a little bit when you're working with typography on the web. So I'm going to close this up. I'm going to close this whole window because we're going to do this from scratch. I'll keep type scale open because we'll kind of look at this here, because we're going to kind of start with 1, 1 1/4, 1 1/2, 2, 2 1/2, 3. We're going to kind of use that size as rems instead of using pixels. And here I'm going to close this up. Actually, I'm going to go here and make a new one. So I'll make a new repel, and I'll search HTML, and I'll put 15 dash, I'll just call it web units, and I'll put my last name, first initial, and I'll hit, this will be the assignment that we turn in. So I'm going to hit create repel. And when this opens, I'm going to open this up in a new tab, and we'll change the title here. And then I'll go back here, I'll resize this because we don't really need to preview it in here. And I'll get rid of Hello World and the script link because we're not going to use any JavaScript. I'll go over here to the 3 dots over script.js and get rid of that. And this stuff here, if you want, you could kind of tab it over and go back. I like to keep it at that kind of 4 space mark, and you'll see the lines there. And you could change the title and just put 15 web units. You could put your last name so that it shows up here. If you refresh this, that'll change, but nothing will show here. And we'll kind of build up some structure here on our page. We'll just throw in some headlines and some paragraphs with some lorem type. So we'll go in here to body, and the first thing I'll do is I'll put in an H1. Remember, you could just do H1 and hit tab. And inside there, I'll just put main headline, just as kind of a placeholder. And then after that, I'll make an H2. I'll do H2 and tab, and the shortcut will put the tags. So then I could put this, just another placeholder there. I made it a little bit longer. And then we'll do 3 paragraphs. And I'll give them class names because they're going to be all different sizes, kind of structure. So we're not going to use headers, but I'll make like a P medium, a P large, and a P small. P for paragraph. So I'll make the P large first, so I'll put P.large, and that's just a class name that I'm giving it, and then I'll hit tab, and inside there I'll do lorem, and I'll put 25, and I'll hit tab. So it's not a really long paragraph. And then after that, I'll do P.medium, and you could do medium or normal or something, and I'll hit tab, and then inside there I'll put lorem 45, and hit tab. And if that ever doesn't work, just backspace and try it again. And then finally, I'll put p.small. This could be for a copyright or some kind of small copy at the bottom. I'll hit tab, and then inside here, I'll just put lorem 15, and I'll hit tab. So we have our 3 paragraphs, we have our headlines, we have all our HTML copy right now, we have 3 class names. We're not using class names for the H1 and H2. And we're linked up to our style.css, so we're going to go to style.css and get rid of wow, the wow class. And what we'll do first is we'll do a reset. We'll just do a asterisk, space, and the curly braces, and we'll just get rid of margin. And actually, before I do that, before I do anything here, we'll take a look at this. So let's go here, refresh, and take a look at it and just see what we have so far. I'll right click and I'll use inspect down here, and we'll just look at some of the parts here. And I'm looking at the elements. The head I don't have to worry about, but I'll go into the body, and you can see when I hover over main headline, I'm seeing that orange is the margin. I'm seeing orange margin, and if I click on it, I should see some styling over here, and this is default. It's saying display block, which means it goes across the page. It's saying font size 2M. It's saying margin block start 0.67 EM. That doesn't matter right now as far as what we're doing. It's saying font weight bold, which is all default. And we're seeing this thing here because I never finished that. And then the subheadline, we're seeing 1.5 M, which is, again, standard for an H2. It's 1.5 times whatever the default size is, and it's bold. And we're seeing a little bit more kind of margin there above and below of its actual size. So that's kind of a percentage of its size, the margin that it's using there. And then that's saying bold as well. And then we have paragraphs here which are basically just saying block. They're just saying the margin 1M above and below. So that's all we have there. They're all the same. So we're going to change them. I don't think there's anything really inside here. I don't think we're seeing any font sizes, but the font size is going to be 16 because that's the default. We just looked at that before. But the other ones we're seeing are M. Now M just means 2M, it means double 16, so it's like 32 pixels. So we'll talk more about that. That is relative, and that's by default. And what I'm going to do is go here again and get rid of, I'll put 0 and put a semicolon and just get rid of the margin. And I'll refresh it, and you can see all the margin is gone here and all the paragraphs are kind of jumbled together. There we're seeing the margin 0, which means there's 0 all around. You can see it's actually using pixels for that. And when I hover over these, I'm not seeing any margin. And I know sometimes we take away the padding, but padding is really just for lists and things. The padding isn't really creating any space in here. It's actually margins that are creating those paddings. And now we've taken them away, so there's no margin at all. So we're going to add our own custom margin in there, and we're going to adjust our point sizes based on type scale. So now that we did that, let's go after body here. So I'll target body and put 2 curly braces, and we'll just give it a width and just make it like 50%, just so it doesn't take up so much of the page. And I'll put my semicolon, and then also we'll do a margin on the right and left. And the way we could do right and left is we could put 2 values. We could put top and bottom, and I'm just going to put like 36 pixels so far. We could change that to M's eventually. Matter of fact, you could do this. You could just go and put 2M. That'll make it like 32. And if you made it a little more, it might make it 36, like 2.2M. That would be like 36. Now, that's top and bottom, and then we'll use auto for right and left. When you have 2 values there, this is top and bottom, this is right and left. So you don't have to use 4 values. And what that'll do is hopefully center it in the page. Auto should center it in the page. Margin, width, I have my semicolons. Let's see what this looks like. And I'll refresh it, and that looks good. That's what we want. And then we could even throw in a little background color here. I'll just put background, I'll click on background and put a dash. It doesn't finish off the auto correct here to give me background color, so I have to put that in myself and put the colon, and I'll type in antique white, or start to type it in, and put a semicolon, and then click on this and make it a little bit lighter and hit enter. Oh, I didn't put the semicolon. Try that again. There we go. So now we have a little kind of vanilla kind of background here. And we're going to adjust the sizing of this, and we're going to adjust the headings, and we're going to use this. So we're going to treat the first paragraph as large, the second is medium, the third is small, and we're also going to put some spacing in there, and we're going to use root M's, meaning everything will be based on root of 16. So we don't even have to put that in there. We don't have to put HTML16, but we can to look at it later. But right now, let's just target all our text elements, and we're going to use this. We'll use an H1 and H2, and then we'll target our P large, P medium, and P small. So we'll do the H1, and hit enter. We'll target the H2, put the curly braces, hit enter, and then we'll do the P's. I'll do P dot large and put the curly braces, and then I'll do the P dot medium, if that's what I called it, and the curly braces, and then finally the P dot small. And if I want, I could do this. Let me just show this first, so we kind of get an idea of what's happening here. I'm going to put P, and I'm just going to target all the P's. So this targets all the P's. These are the individual P's. So I'm just going to put margin top, and I'll just put 1em for now, which would be 16 pixels. So I'll put that in there for now, and let's just see what it looks like so far. So the paragraphs have the space in between. We don't have any space up here. We could put a little, maybe half with the H2. So I'll go in and do that. I'll go into the H2, and I'll copy this one. I don't have to retype it. And I'll do 0.5. I don't want as much there, so I'll do 0.5em. Now, again, this is supposed to be about rems, so why am I saying ems? Well, I just want to show you something first, so I'll refresh this. Now, the problem is, when we do that, it's based on the point size that you have in there. So rems is actually all based on 16. That's why we're going to probably go back and change this. But I want to put this in first just to see what it looks like. So let's put some point sizes in here. And we want to put point sizes for everything. We're going to use this type scale. So we're going to put 1 rem for the medium. We're going to put 0.8 for the small, or 0.85. We could use 1.25. And then we're going to use basically 3 and 2.5. And we may adjust that a little bit more. So let's go down and do this one. We'll do the medium. I'll do that first, and I'll just do font size. And we're not changing any fonts yet. And I'll just do 1 rem. Now rem means it's going to be relative to the root. So that's what the R means. And then I'll just copy this so I can use it again. I'll copy this and put it down to small, and I'll put 0.85 rem. And then I'll paste this one here, and I'll make this 1.25 rem. And then the H2, that one I'll do 2.5, and the H1 I'll do 3, and see how that looks. And we're going to use rems for that. So I'll paste, and I'll do 2.5. That may be too big. Actually, I'm going to use 2. I think I did it before in class, and I think 2.5 is a little big. Even though that's part of the schema that they're using there, I'm just going to use 2. And then for this one, I'm going to use 3. And we'll see what that looks like. Now we have these all kind of captured now for font size. And let's see what this looks like. Okay, so we have a bigger headline. I'll move this down a little bit. And that's kind of a nice kind of look that we have going on there. Kind of a nice structure. And again, this is based on 16 pixels being the default. So what I wanted to show here is we did put a margin top of 1em for all the paragraphs, and let's just see what they look like. Now, what if I went and put a margin top of 1 rem? Would that change anything? Let's see. And it did. It changed slightly. And that's because rem is based on the root, and these are based on their own size. So that's the only real difference of rems versus ems. And actually, it's kind of better to use rems because it's always going back to the one value. So you get some consistency. You always know what it's going to be based on, so 1 rem for here, they're all going to be the same because they're all based on whatever the main size is if it's 16. And it is. I mean, we could put it in here, but it is because we see it's in the browser. And what's nice about this is, even if you thought all this stuff was a little small, you could go in here and put a target for HTML, which is the absolute root. And you could do like a global font size of 1.2 rem. So that would be 1.2 times 16 pixels, whatever the default is. So if you did that, then everything would be based on that. So that's where it kind of makes this relative kind of more efficient, because you don't have to go through and change all these. I mean, individually if you needed to, but now let's say everything was just a little bit on the small side. Now if you go here and refresh, now it's scaling everything kind of based on that. Now let's check everything here, because I think we still had M here. So H2 has a margin top of 0.5 M. Let's change that to rem so that everything's the same. Let me fix that. And that's a little bit better. It's a little bit closer now. Now they're using the same distance all the time because everything is based on, in this case, is based on the root. So kind of what we're doing here is we're just using units that are based on the root. R instead of M's. M's are usually almost like percent, but the fact that we're using the R, it makes it root. So everything is kind of based on the root. So it keeps kind of a consistency here. In fact, there's even some people who will say, oh, make the root font size like 10 pixels or something, so that everything can be multiplied by 10. It's easier to do the math. I don't really like doing that. So I'm not going to show doing that, but that way you could do like 1.25 would be like 12 or something like that, or 1.2 would be 12 point and 16 point. You could kind of relate it to points a little bit better, but I like the idea of that you could just go here and change the root. So that's all I'm really going over here, is just kind of showing this style here. And there's different ways to do this. Here's another one that's using 1.3, 1.7. It's using kind of a different kind of ratio here for a different kind of setup, and you could do this. This is using 0.751, it's using 4.2, 3.1. You could go here and just use this kind of look. 4.2, 3.1, we'll just try that out. 4.2, and then I'll use 3.1. This will be a lot bigger. Now I'll put this back at just 1, so it's really not changing anything. And then some of these, the medium was still 1, this one was 0.75, and this one is 1.7. I'll put 1.75 for this one too. So I'll put instead of 1.25, I'll put 1.75. It's just a different look, a different scheme that you're using here. And I'll go up here and I'll refresh this. And now you can see it's a little more bolder in terms of the headlines. It's got a bigger headline, and this stuff's getting a little bit smaller here. So that's just a different kind of setup that we're using here. But I like the one here that's called Major Third. Again, this is typescale.com, and it kind of sets up this structure, different kinds of structures for different kinds of web pages. But I like this one here. It has a nice variation here of different sizes that we're using. So I'll go back here and just adjust that. Again, I had keeping 1 for the medium, keeping 1.25 for the large, and keeping 0.85. And again, rem basically means root. Everything is relative to the root. And if you don't specify root, it's whatever the user is using, like 16 pixels. And if you do, even if you use rem here, that's based on the root, but you could go in here and start it out at 18 pix if you want. And then everything is kind of going from there. So it kind of resets the default, and then everything will be bigger. So if you did that, then everything's going to be even bigger when you do that. But I'll go back and I'll change these because I didn't want 4.2 here. I had it like 3. I had this one at maybe 2. And everything else looks okay here. Actually, I want a little less here. I'll put 0.4. And I'll take this out of being 18 pix, and I'll just put 1 rem for now, which is basically just default. It's not really changing anything. So it's the same as the default that's specified by the browser. So that way, if the user changes things, everything scales and it keeps it relative to each other too. You don't just have like one headline that's too small or anything like that. Everything is kind of scaling. Everything's kind of in a system here, is kind of the idea of doing this for web typography. And that's kind of a little bit more of a modern way of doing things. So let me reset this here. This is a little bit smaller now. I think that's the way we had it initially as far as what we have. And if you don't like that, if you want a little bit bigger, I'll just put 1.1 rem. And now that'll just kind of bump everything up related to each other. So that's the whole idea here of using these. So that's rems, that's root m units. It's kind of a relative unit that's linking back to the root, and it's kind of a nice schema to work with in terms of web typography. So when you're done just doing this, that's all you have to do. Just copy this and go back. This is still in unit 10. Here's 15. You can go in here. I already have one in here, but all you're going to do is just go add a comment, insert a link, paste in your link from Replit, go down here, change this to new window, save, and that's it. I have a second one here because I did the first one in class, and that's working with CSS units called rems, which if you've heard M's, these are just linked to the root, so they're a little more consistent for the overall page that you're working on. So That's a little bit more with web typography, working with rems.